welcome to the Resilient Mental State Podcast. I'm Kyle Shepard, husband, father, and resilience instructor of over 10 years. Join me as I sit down with writers, independent thinkers, and extraordinary individuals to discuss their unique wisdom through the lens of resilience. Resilience is the ability to effectively manage and recover from stress. It is essential to endure and grow from life's inevitable adversities. Resilience is a skill that can be trained. Michael Ostrolenk. I've talked to several people on this podcast now with some pretty extraordinary stories, impressive professional experience, but I am quite confident that I've never talked to anyone in my life more qualified to speak on the skill that is resilience than you. You have been in the arena in various forms, teaching, coaching, practicing, and truly implementing resilience into your life and others for the past 30 years. Now, I could spend the next hour just going through your bio, talking about all the different jobs and cool things that you've done. But just to give like an overview of the heavy hitters of what you've done in the recent years, you were a master coach and head instructor of the Unbeatable Mind Academy with Seal Fit. And for those that are watching the video, I have 8 Weeks of Seal Fit, the book behind me, written by Mark Divine. And Seal Fit, for those that are not aware, enormous platform and program established by Mark Divine, former SEAL turned author and leadership executive coach, and just incredible individual. So you worked with him for 10 years as a master coach and head instructor. You then went on to be a resilience coach with Spartan 7 Industries, as well as the director of human resilience at Appear on Zoe, which I learned in our talk tonight that means limitless in Greek, which is really cool. Yeah. You started the Resilience Redefined podcast over 18 years ago. Incredible podcast. I love listening to it with your guests and your stories. So that's on my regular listen. And then also you founded Resilience Optimized, which is what I'm calling this podcast tonight. And when did you found that company?
Well, so I've been doing this work, like you said, for 30 years, but like doing business as that, the Resilience Optimized was just a couple of years ago. Because I've had different iterations. Previous to that is the emergent human, which I can talk to you about. You know, there's no final stage of human development. It's emergence, emergent quality. But that was so academic. I'm like, I can't go there. I'm going to go to resilience because that's what I'm pretty much known for, and everyone talks about when they talk to me about it. So yeah, like I said, I've been doing it forever, but the name is only a couple years old.
That's sure. Kind of what I gathered and what I thought, but I figured I would just ask you specifically rather than take a guess at it. But I mean, you really are doing what many others like Mark Divine does, but specifically through the concept of resilience, helping people improve their lives mentally, physically, socially, and spiritually. And I love all these different lanes that you have within Resilience Optimized because you have very focused coaching and facilitation of relationships. You do one-on-one to help people in any capacity that they're working on. And just reading your work, talking to you, which I've been fortunate to do a few times before this, and learning from you is always fascinating. I'm curious, when in your life did you start becoming interested in, and why did you start becoming interested in resilience?
Age 9. I'll tell you a funny story, and it's really effing obnoxious for a 9-year-old. So when we walk through this story, so I unfortunately had an autoimmune disorder when I was 5, and I was in the hospital for a long period of time. And also had some learning disabilities, eventually diagnosed with learning disability, but I had learning challenges. And, you know, at age 5 and then a couple of years into the school, lots of dysregulated nervous system challenges. It manifested as an obsessive compulsive disorder, later diagnosed with that. But at age 9, one of the ways it manifested, I was a hair puller. That's the way I was dealing with my stresses. I pull my hair. I didn't act out, I acted in. And my mom took me to see a psychiatrist, and this is 1979, a long time ago. See the gray in my beard. And at the end of the session, I turned to her and I said, he's fat and he smokes. He can't help himself. How's he going to help me? And I walked out the room. Now, fortunately, I have a long history, including to that very moment where my mom supported my obnoxious perspectives on things. And I didn't get in trouble. And what she ended up doing is she found me a therapist, a psychotherapist, not a psychiatrist. Thank God, for me at least, because in 1979, I just been medicated. That's what the psychiatrists did then, and that's mostly what psychiatrists do now. No judgment on anyone who sees a psychiatrist who gets meds, but I'm just glad that didn't happen to me. Mrs. Lawson, who's my therapist at the time, 1979, I was 9 years old, opened my whole life to a whole different way of thinking and being in the world. She taught me guided imagery. She taught me meditation. She taught me biofeedback. And 1979, I mean, it's really cool as a kid because it was like, if you relax, the balloons rise on the computer screen. If you get stressed, the balloons fall. So you learn how to manage your nervous system through breath practices and mantras to like change the altitude of the balloons. Now it's like so much more cooler than that. But back then, that was the neatest effing thing in the world. And then she got me into the martial arts. So that opened a whole new world that self-reflectively I'll look back and say, oh, I learned about self-management of the nervous system, self-mastery, resilience, but I didn't have that language back then. I just was doing really cool things to change my nervous system so I wouldn't feel so crappy, basically.
I love that. Which
Yeah.
martial arts did you get into?
So my first one was Taekwondo under Junery, which is required by law. All teenagers back in the day had to study, Taekwondo. Maybe they still, I think probably it's jujitsu now, but back in the day, it was Taekwondo. And it's funny too. I was sitting here with my girlfriend and we're going through one of my photo albums of when I was in the martial arts, studying with Junery, and like brought back some really, really good memories. I was 9, 10, 11, 12. I got my black belt when I was 13, so I studied under him for, I guess that's 4 years, which is really cool.
Very cool. And I love these origin stories where, I mean, you're 9 years old and you said it already. You were you were doing it without the language. So you were gaining this experience to overcome some challenges that you were facing. And then you also had an incredible mentor in your therapist that were teaching you some of these strategies that maybe you wouldn't have found yourself. When did you start attaching the language to the skill of resilience, even though you were already doing the things to help build it?
Yeah, so I'd say probably early to mid teenager years, 15, 16, 17, 18. Because as I got into the martial arts, of course, I got into Bruce Lee. So I watched Enter the Dragon every morning, every afternoon, every evening, all the opportunities I could. And studying Bruce Lee, I started picking up the language as an example. And then my first three books I purchased, and I literally bought them myself. I saved up Zen Mind, No Mind by Daisei Suzuki, Zen and the Martial Arts, and a book on yoga. So I started learning, at least from the Eastern perspective, some of the language they use to describe kind of resilience and self mastery and self regulation. And I remember one of my first magazines I subscribed to was East West Journal. So also, like from the Eastern perspective, I just walked through the Taoist and Buddhist and yogic systems, and then the Western kind of alternative spirituality and alternative psychology. So like I was studying that as a kid, and I started picking up the language from those studies. And then I was really fortunate. I lived in D.C. and most of our neighbors either work for the agency or the bureau or military contractors or for the military. So I always got to spend time with like my parents' friends. So I preferred to spend time with the adults. And you listen to a lot of those guys who maybe at my parents' age, they're more bureaucratic doing type of things than when they're active. But like, 10, 15, 20 years earlier, they're doing things that are, kind of really cool, especially for a little kid to or a teenager by this time to hear about. And you pick up some of the language from those kind of guys as well. So like I'd say it's a combination of the books I read, the martial arts I studied, the practices I learned, the magazines I read as well, and then talking to people around me in my community who started giving me the language so I could better understand what I knew what I was doing, but I could describe what I was doing through the language I was receiving for these different inputs.
And pairing that language to what you're doing just adds more intention to building upon what you're doing already and taking the direction you try to apply it. And one thing I'm always interested in is applying resilience in domains of opportunity in your life. I think we all have our strength. I know we all have our strengths and our weaknesses. So where your strengths are, you acquire those strengths because you're resilient there, you're passionate about it, and you get after it in that way. So whether that's professionally, whatever your job is, whether that's your hobbies, athletics, whatever it may be, whether it's relationships and interpersonal skills, we all have those strengths. But
Yep.
taking those strengths and how you developed them in the first place, how can that be translated to another domain in your life to build resilience there, to start thriving in that capacity? And while the concepts are similar, the application does become different and it has to be very specific. I love the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands, used in exercise physiology quite a bit. But I don't care how good you are as a basketball player, that doesn't mean you're going to be a good dad and husband. You
Yeah,
can be, you have the capacity, but how do
yeah,
you take what made you such a good basketball player and then start doing those difficult things on purpose and getting more comfortable with what originally made you uncomfortable to fulfill whatever your values are? And I'm not saying everybody has to be a good, I mean, if they're a dad, they should be a good dad. Outside of that, and if you're a husband, you commit yourself to life, maybe try to be a good husband too until it doesn't make sense. But translating those skills and putting language behind it is so empowering. And that's something I play with all the time. And I love talking to people like you because we need that language so we understand the why behind what we're doing.
right, right, right. You know, it's really cool. I'm like, going, okay, well, should I go in this direction? Should I go in this direction? Because you kind of lighting my brain on fire. You know, when I have individual clients come to me, I'll use this as a vehicle to speak to what you just said. They'll come to me like, hey, I want to work on this thing, whatever the thing is. And yeah, in most cases, because I'm actually trained as a psychotherapist. I'm licensed in the state of California. I don't practice. I've been practicing the approach for 25 years of my 30 years, but my background training is a therapist. So I'm always thinking like, okay, they come to me for this, but it's usually this underneath it. But my resilience mind goes, okay, yeah, there might be something underneath it, but my interest in working with people, yes, we can work on the problem that they came to solve, but I want to develop the capacities and the skills necessary, not only to deal with that one thing, but all the things that come their way. And that's where my mind goes. And I think that's really, nothing wrong with working with a therapist or a coach on a particular thing. That's awesome. If it works for you, that's great. But like my preference is to put myself out of business that you're so capable and you've created the environment to support you, the people that can support you, could be a therapist or coach down the road too, the inner capacities, the inner skills, like your ecosystem internally and externally is really dialed in so you can thrive and deal with whatever the adversities life throws your way.
Coincidentally, I put a note on Substack today saying a good coach is someone who tries to like teach themselves out of a job,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you just described that beautifully from a therapeutic and or coach standpoint. Like
yep,
you want to not be needed anymore. You want to give them the skills not only for the problem at hand, but to apply conceptually. Of course, then we need to get specific within the concept to
right,
other domains of life, and that's why I love the skill that is resilience. When you know you can do hard things and you're struggling somewhere else, there's your new hard thing, applying the same lessons that you've learned where you have overcome challenge to this new challenge. And you're writing, you're speaking, you cover that time and time again in different ways, which is why I'm such a big fan of you.
nice. Oh, and actually, I'll say the same about you. I restack you all the time on Substack.
Thank you,
You put
brother.
out some good stuff there. Yeah,
Appreciate that. So
yeah.
was you said you're a trained psychotherapist. Was that kind of your first job and entry into the professional world thinking about resilience?
No, so I was actually in the middle of an MBA program. Family friend in DC, he was a high ranking so and so within a particular government agency. And I was like, I'm thinking law enforcement. That's where I was originally going to go. All the resilience, personal growth and development stuff was a private interest. But as a teenager, actually, even as a little kid, but as a teenager, going towards college times, I was always going to go, military, law enforcement, intelligence. That's kind of a plan. And I interviewed with this guy very privately because family friend. He's like, "Oh, go. This is the '80s. Go get your MBA. Either become a lawyer or go get your MBA." Okay, like I have no interest in business, but I'll get my MBA or whatever because it seems like the thing to do to get a high ranking within the federal government. Okay, cool. So I was in the middle of an MBA program, and unfortunately, a dear friend of mine since kindergarten was murdered. Um, and then a month later, the teacher committed suicide. And it was one of those, dark nights of the soul, like from the Jungian sense of things. And I was like, man, I don't like the MBA. I have no interest in business at the time. I was doing fine, like 3.5 grade point averages, pretty easy. And I was like, what do I really like? What am I really interested in? And I go back to what I've been studying privately for my whole life: resilience, self mastery, self regulation, alternative health, wellness, performance. All those things. I was like, "That's where I wanna go study." So I kind of dropped out, went west, and started my graduate work at John F. Kennedy University in transpersonal counseling psychology, then but did postgraduate training in somatic or body psychology at the California Institute for Clinical Studies.
So knowing you have a background in transpersonal psychology, can you explain what transpersonal
Yeah.
psychology is?
Has nothing to do with the trans movement, but the trans means through and beyond the personal, through and beyond the ego. And there's many different ways of talking about it, but the most interesting one for me for these kind of conversations is if you look at every religious system, the monotheistic ones in the Middle East or yoga, Hinduism, or the shamanic traditions in South and Central America or Africa, Taoism, Buddhism, in the Middle East, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Um, all of them have spiritual practices, different ones. Some of them are the same: meditation, prayer, chanting, yogic breathing, psychedelic plants, pain practices, sensory deprivation, all kinds of different things from different traditions. Why? Because those practices have been shown over hundreds of thousands of years, probably even longer, to induce changes of consciousness. Some of them open the heart, so you're more loving, caring, compassionate. Some expand the mind, so you see things more clearly. Some free the body from the constraints that we have from living on a three-dimensional world on planet Earth. So different practices do different things. And in my graduate study, we had to study ego psychology and psychodynamic psychology and object relations and family systems, all the normal stuff you have to study to get licensed. But we also studied the various schools in the transpersonal space of these various practices, which have shown a lot more research now. This is in the 90s. You know, yeah, we can say hundreds and thousands of years of research to show they're effective. Awesome. But now from the Western medical perspective, like, oh yeah, we know meditation works. We have, some of these breathing practices have been efficacious for certain psychophysiological challenges we face. Plant medicine or MDMA, which is not really a plant, but it's kind of in that space. PTSD, ibogaine, which is a plant for PTSD, traumatic brain injury, LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, all these things. Like there's more and more evidence to show they're efficacious for certain things. I'm a sensory deprivation kind of guy. I've been floating in tanks since the 90s. Those are awesome too. A lot of good research on those. We know that chanting has an effect on the brain in terms of coherence of the brain, chemistry and such, frequencies of the brain. Um, all kinds of practices like the chanting, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we study those various tools and technologies and practices and disciplines for the beneficial effects they have on human health and well-being. That's transpersonal psychology. And what we found in a lot of those practices help you transcend your limited self-sense. I am this, I'm going to defend this to the death, and literally or figuratively or symbolically. And you start doing these practices, you realize I'm much more than this thing that I'm defending. And then you expand yourself and you become more loving and caring, connected and compassionate, stronger, all the things that can come out of personal growth and development beyond the small self sense.
I appreciate how you mentioned that there are all these different treatments, strategies, and things that can be considered that span so much of human history that we have evidence in their practice, let alone now we have evidence based practice and scientifically studying many of them. But I appreciate how you mentioned that some apply to certain domains or certain people. So there are options that can be utilized,
Yeah.
maybe, like you said, to target the heart, the mind, the soul, whatever the constraints are within the individual. And because we tend to look for that one cure for all solution. And man, we are complex species, and within the mind, within the heart, within the soul, problems will come up in various ways for various reasons. But knowing that there are so many different treatments that again span different philosophies, different religions, different cultures throughout history. What a cool form of psychology to get transpersonal psychology and understand the converging concepts that have been around for so long to figure out their unique applications to better someone holistically in whatever the issue may be. A very interesting field.
And you mentioned something I think I want to highlight something that's really important. We're Americans, we like the pill, we take the thing and we're cured of whatever the problem is. You order from Amazon 5 minutes from now and it shows up 4 days ago, like immediate gratification. And we have this unfortunately belief that this kind of a one size fits all. Our education system's organized that way, our healthcare system's organized that way, everything's kind of organized that way. But we're unique, bio-individualized people. Like all of us are unique to some degree or another. And then there's subgroups of people that are different than other groups of people. All that's really important to take into consideration. And I don't think there's any one right treatment that serves everyone at all times in their life. There's seasons for anyone. There's certain things I would highly encourage someone not to do, depending on who they are and their, the psychiatric history or their physical illness history or their family of origin history, like things like that. So I want to highlight that. There's no one thing that solves all of our problems. And in fact, they have to be part of a larger comprehensive human development program, I believe, disciplines and practices and things along those lines, not just the one thing.
Important highlight. And then, of course, when it comes to any medical treatment, you want early intervention if possible, but most importantly, the intervention needs to be appropriate for the issue that's going on. So if you have an individual who's struggling existentially and that they have no immediate symptoms that need urgent intervention to save their life, throwing a pill at that to try and treat symptoms when it's more of an existential problem wouldn't make sense. And of course, we have different tiers of intervention based on the symptomology, the duration of them. But like you said, this needs to be considered holistically with the entire toolkit rather than here's this one solution for this one problem. When you have that understanding in your background and then the networks that you have and the ability to collaborate with others, what a fascinating way to help somebody.
Well, and I'll speak to one of the things you said too. We have a tendency here in the West, especially in America, to medicalize everything. Like things that occur to us or for us, or however you want to kind of existentially look at those things, but like they happen to us, we in the West have a tendency to say, oh, that's a medical problem. We're going to use the medical paradigm to solve whatever the thing is. And mostly it's symptom management. It's not even solving the problem, whatever the problem might be. And it's like, no, like life can be really fucking hard sometimes. Like, of course, you're going to get anxious over that, or not always, but like, or depressed over that particular incident. Cause like someone just fucking died. You just lost your house. You just lost your job. Yes. Now, might medications be useful in the short run to help you get over the hump? Perhaps. I'm not going to judge anyone for whatever they need to do to help themselves. But I think it's a mistake to medicalize life, generally speaking. And this is going to throw this in from a completely different angle. And we medicalize birth, for instance. And yeah, there are occasions, and just so we know for conversation's sake, I've been studying pre and perinatal psychology and health since graduate school, so I'm very interested in the field. Um, and yeah, there are circumstances where the wife needs medical intervention, mother needs medical intervention. Understand that it's such a small number of women whose life or the baby's life are threatened. But medicalizing it, we've actually detached the mother from her natural understanding of like how to connect with her baby and how to provide her baby what it needs to thrive, like the vaginal delivery. So it has the microbiome that helps to support its immune function. Breastfeeding, so it gets the food that nature or God intended it to get. Now, yes, there are circumstances where the mother can't breastfeed. I understand. I'm not judging that. But that's so rare and far and few between. It'd be so much nicer if we actually organize our thinking, our culture, and our society around nature's plans for those kind of things. Because you need us less, meaning me as a coach or therapist, because you'd have people who are healthier and happier and more productive if they brought into this world in a less medicalized way.
Yeah, we actually talked about that quite a bit in one of our previous conversations, which is so interesting. I learned a lot from you. But to your point, just conceptually, where we medicalize feelings of discomfort or feelings in general, like that's something to be suppressed. Where like feelings are what make us human, and if you can't feel, how are you going to be able to function in a rational and a human manner going forward? So if we're treating symptoms, if we're treating feelings and trying to suppress that, it's going to be, I mean, sure, you can stay alive, you can survive. And medicine, to be fair, has allowed us to survive much
Yeah.
better than before. And that's
Mhm.
in all realms of life. And we're very lucky for that. But over medicating is what prevents us from thriving. So we're lucky to be able to survive longer, but we're unlucky if we over medicate when it comes to being able to thrive. So finding that happy medium for the rare cases that you mentioned, for those urgent cases to get over humps, and to find solutions that benefit the person to get through the challenge in
Mhm.
the short term, wean off so they can thrive in the long term. And that's just an orientation within the culture.
I co-lead a men's group with JC Glick, former Army Ranger, great dude. Might be a good fun guest for you to have. And we talk about resilience 2.0, and I think it might be a nice segue because you just like, oh my god, you just nailed the segue to this conversation. Part of the 1.0 is like Jocko Willemick, get up at 4:30 in the morning, lift heavy weights, or run 100 miles before breakfast like a David Goggins. Yeah, that's awesome depending on the season of your life. Like if you're 20, you don't do shit. You get out of bed, get some discipline, make your bed, and go train really hard because it gets really good for you. Maybe less so when you're 40 and 50 and 60. Not saying you shouldn't train, but longevity is your thing, not necessarily doing really hard fucking things and breaking the body up. Okay, maybe like everyone's unique, everyone's different. For us, resilience 2.0, and you hit it. Part of it's like emotional resilience, which for us is, are you able to sit in your own experience for longer periods of time without seeking distraction? Like we have a tendency as men, but also as human beings, to like with the women as well. We're like, oh, I don't want to feel that. So I'm going to go to drugs, prescription, over the counter, or recreational, alcohol, porn, um, um, YouTube, Netflix, working out, like whatever I can do to distract myself so I don't feel the thing. And to your point with some of the medications that people are on, especially psychiatric medications, are intended to dampen feelings. Okay, maybe understandable in the very short run, but that's what makes us human. And I think, like you just suggested, for most people, at most times, it's really important to actually learn how to feel your feelings. Doesn't mean you have to act on them, but feel them, even if they're really uncomfortable. Because if you don't process your feelings, one or two things most likely will happen. They'll come out sideways, a passive aggressive behavior. They'll come out as chronic illnesses somewhere down the road.
Big fan of JC Glick, by the way. So I
Yeah.
found him because of you. I
Nice.
follow both of you extensively. He was just on our friend Marcus Aurelius Anderson's podcast.
Nice.
Halfway through that, really enjoying that too. He's always great. And actually, I have a question related to him later on. But I want to come back to Resilience 2.0. Um, Many definitions for basically every word in the world out there. And I like thinking quite a bit, as you know, about resilience. I'm curious, like compared to maybe definitions you thought it was when you were a kid or other definitions that people apply to that word now. You obviously host a podcast, Resilience Redefined. How do you like to define resilience?
So I can go back to what I thought it was and then what I'm imagining it to be now. I'm kind of reimagining it. And it's a evolutionary process for me. So if you ask me, hopefully 5 years from now, I have a different answer, more expansive than it is today. But I originally thought it was like, I can just push through everything. Fall down 8 times, get up 9 times, wipe the blood off myself, and just keep going. Doesn't matter, in Japanese, kokoro and dumbbell spirit, I can push through the thing. And that's where a lot of awesome shit that I learned at SEALFIT. Like, you just, push through, and I can tell you fun stories, but, like,
Kokoro Camp.
yeah. And that's, I think it's an important capacity to be able to have the willpower to push through when you don't feel like it. Your body's saying, I'm tired. Your mind's all over the place. Your emotions are somewhere else. And you're like, I'm going to push through stuff. That's great. That's awesome. It's important for all human beings, especially men, to learn how to do. But it doesn't stop there. And this is where, like, the next iteration for me, the evolutionary thing was, okay, let's look at the whole human system, not just willpower. And let's like, okay, how do we make the physical system resilient? How to make the emotions, the mind, the spirit resilient? And I'll walk through each of these. But we're contextualized, at least in my theory and understanding of the world, in relationships. How to make relationships resilient. And the other side for me of resilience is rest and recovery. I'm 55. Getting a little bit older. And it's like, I can't necessarily do what I did when I was in my 20s. I think I can. And I can give you examples like 2 years ago, I did, but like there are consequences, and one of the hard lessons I learned over these years is like, oh, wait, yes, I can push myself through these things. I can get to the other side, but I'll probably live a lot longer, a lot healthier if I build in rest and recover. So, like, we can, if you like to break down physical resilience and mental, emotional, and spiritual and interpersonal as well. And then I would contextualize it to your environment, like your physical environment, which we can talk about as well.
I would love to break it down, like you said, into each one. I mean, this is what I'm passionate about. I love
I know.
talking about resilience as a skill,
Yeah,
in the physical. I mean, I literally always talk about physical, mental, social, and spiritual domains. There are
totally.
others that some people break down mental into like emotional and cognitive and psychological. So like they'll break down mental, but I just throw that all into the mind, and then you can break that out based on where your opportunities are, because emotional intelligence is crucial. But yeah, those four domains, and some people say financial, of course, keep your money squared away. But and that is a specific realm that maybe, I mean, for me, money influences my ability. So I do need some base level income in order to be resilient, but I tend not to focus in that area. One, it's not my expertise, but two, I feel like you could compartmentalize that based on what you need the money for so you can be resilient. for what maybe your other values that are more intrinsic rather than extrinsic. But I would
Well,
love to break down, like you said, in those
well,
domains.
definitely, and I'm gonna share a shadow or a blind spot because up until 2 weeks ago, I never brought in financial resilience into my resilience conversation, but I actually interviewed a guy for my podcast, come out in a couple weeks, on financial resilience. And I'm like, dude, that's like a whole hole in my thinking. And I'm really glad I started to talk to him and learned his thinking because, like, okay, I need to fill that hole. So I'll put that over there because I have not filled the hole yet. I'm learning how to do it.
I mean, financial independence to be able to do what it is that you want to do, create what you want to create. I mean, that is a realm worth considering, even for human resilience. And like you, it's something that I read about and I'm fascinated by with people that speak to it well, with maybe without using that word. But yeah, like you said, can table it, and maybe that's an opportunity for both of us to get intentionally uncomfortable for a while and add to our toolkit. But I'd love to know the domains that you are well rounded in right now.
All right, so we can start with the physical resilience or physical optimization, and it's seasonal. Like 20-year-old, 50-year-old, 7-year-old, different spaces in their lives. But I look at and you're the hardcore physical guy too. It's like work capacity, stamina, flexibility, mobility, strength, endurance. All those various aspects Mark talks about in his book, and still fit. Like, have you maximized those things in your life where you are in your life? And so it's like it can be age specific or intent. Like, if you're training for an event like a Tough Mudder or Spartan race or used to Coral Camp at SealFit or, one of the I did a 50-mile Go Ruck a couple years ago, those kind of things. You train hard for the thing, which is a different way than a training for like longevity. I would never train the way I did for my 50-mile Go Ruck on a regular basis. That's for me, it would be stupid. But if I, spent, a year training out for or 9 months training out for the thing, that's perfect, you know. But like right now, I'm not training for a thing. I'm just training for longevity. So my training's completely shifted. But I look at those domains like, flexibility and mobility, strength, all this stuff. I'm like, oh, what do I need to do to maximize my capabilities in those particular things? Looking at an integrated whole. And the name I've given my training program for myself is Fit for Anything, Fit for Everything. Like, do I need to be SEAL fit anymore? Probably not. Although it's kind of fun to think about it. But what I want to be able to do is like, if you called me up and say, hey, let's go on a 10-mile rock, easy, no big deal. Or if a buddy of mine called me up and says, hey, let's do Krav Maga fighting for a couple hours. Cool, I can do that. Or somebody else said, let's go for a swim. Like, shit, I haven't swam in a while, but okay, that's awesome. Or let's go for a hike in the mountains or a run or, let's do a CrossFit workout. Like I'm capable. I mean, am I a CrossFit athlete? No, but I'm capable of doing all those various things in the various areas successfully without killing myself. Like that's for me, fit for anything, for everything. And for some people, like, hey, I'm a soccer player. I just want to train up for that. Cool. That's awesome. Or martial arts, is my thing. I want to be capable in multiple different areas to have fun with my friends, basically.
I dig it.
That,
Fit for anything, fit for everything. I dig that, and very much like Michael Easter talking about super medium,
yeah.
and it's the more you specialize somewhere, the more you're gonna have vulnerabilities. Just you mentioned all those different adaptations. The stronger I am, the more muscle mass I have, it's gonna come at the cost of flexibility and other issues if I am truly trying to optimize one domain. And based on I also like what you said where you're talking about what your intent is, what your values are, and what your age is, because that will vary throughout life too. Where when we're younger, more durable, can recover faster, get after it. If you're an athlete, man, maximize everything in that lane so you can take advantage of the opportunity you have, whether it's professionally or whatever it may be. But when you think about all the 9 adaptations, and maybe some people say more than 9 or various ways, but either way, multiple physical adaptations, how do we get good enough everywhere so we can be anywhere and say yes to opportunities that come in our life for things that we want to do? And you say it very succinctly in fit for anything, fit for everything. I like that. And maximizing for me, I would take that as like if you have those 9 columns of each adaptation, it's not going to be 100%. You're not going to be elite anywhere. And I like seeing these tables where people talk about like strength or endurance or stamina, and then they'll give categories of like you need to be able to run a marathon in this amount of time. You need to be able to deadlift 2.5 your body weight to be elite. Squat 1.5 or bench 1. I don't remember the numbers, but I always enjoy reading them because I'm in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
I'm rarely elite in any category, but I'm good or advanced almost in all of them. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's where I want to be because I could tip the scale if I focus my effort in one area. But I'm almost 40, and like you, how can I just keep saying yes to my kids, one day my grandkids, and life when the opportunities come up, and then change accordingly based on the phase of life and what I'm trying to get after at that time.
I love that. And the person who helped me open my eyes to all this, do you know Erwan LaCour from MoveNat.com?
I do not.
Oh my god, I gotta hook you guys up.
Yes.
He would be a great person for you to talk to. He's created through his own experiences a movement system that's based on like evolution biology, how we were designed. If you look at not design in the design religious sense, but like evolved to move on planet Earth. And so he's a friend of mine, and I did his training. I got certified in the system, and I went to the first workshop so I get certified. And the coach is like, "Show me how you crawl." I'm like, "I fucking know how to crawl. Show me how you walk, run, lift, carry, throw. All the things." I'm like, "Oh, that's so easy. That's it." Like, no, like my crawling sucked. My walking, of course I could walk. I'm a human being. Fortunately, I have both legs at work, but like like
The gate. Yeah.
gravity, yeah, it wasn't very good. The running was like, yeah, I can run long distances and I do pretty well, but like if I want to have long term stability in my body over time with this kind of running, no. Everything I was doing was like, not was pretty poor. So like we had to go through the basics. Like I literally learned how to crawl again, do all the things. And by the time I got certified in level 2, we we're doing like the Ninja Warrior training stuff. But you have to really start really basic. And that was really an eye opener for me. Like I thought I was a pretty good athlete, but I was like, maybe, but not really.
Learning
Really good
techniques
stuff.
within specific movements, whether that is lifting weights, like you said, mobility. It's always interesting to talk to an expert or somebody who has been in that area for a while because they can pick out the finest things. And then you have to unlearn, which takes some time. But if you're willing to empty that cup, unlearn so you can relearn the fundamentals appropriately, my goodness, when you start having proper running form, proper squatting form, your numbers go up, you feel more efficient, you recover better, you're not as sore. It's so interesting, but man, we can compensate really well in all
Yeah.
domains. We've only talked about physical
Yeah.
so far. We can compensate in any area of life, and then we learn to work within the constraints that we've applied to ourselves.
Yeah.
And change is hard, but my goodness, when change can be productive for your life, what a worthwhile pursuit to take on. And so you can start to unlearn and relearn and become more
Yeah.
effective.
I'm gonna let's throw out another like, oh my god, I hit a wall and I really learned how limited I am in my own abilities. Um, I I was recovering from injuries, and my doctor's like, he's a physical, like he's really well physically. Is that how I said this? He's not just a doctor. He knows the physical body really well, not just from a medical perspective, from a fitness perspective. So I was working with him. He's like, "Hey, I don't want you rocking." I was like, "Oh my god, I love rocking." He's like, You're not walking correctly. If you carry heavy load, you're just gonna screw yourself." So so I was relearning to walk again, different than with Erwan. That was earlier in my life, but like, yeah, injury, I was just recovering. And so he had me get on a wall, like not a wall ball, but like a incline, standing on a wall and doing some exercises on the wall. And he just said, "Can you activate that tendon in your left lower, where was this? Ankle?" What? I have an activated tendon. I couldn't activate the tendon. Like I had to spend like an hour working with him so I could activate this one tendon in my ankle. And he's just showing me how there's so many muscles that I was not able to consciously activate, which means, that I wasn't using them appropriately. The muscles themselves weren't using it appropriately. I was like, wow, okay, so much more lessons for me to learn. So yes.
I'm gonna kick myself because I should know this guy's name off the top of my head, and I'm forgetting it. He was on the Huberman podcast in the past year or so. I was following his work already, but he's a fitness coach, probably an exercise physiologist, all kinds of backgrounds, really intelligent, really fit, does all kinds of cool workouts. But he was talking about the ability to consciously contract muscle groups, particularly specific muscle groups. And the more tightly you can contract it, the more neurologically adapted you are to that area. And the less you are, the more you need to train that area. So just sitting here, me thinking about like flexing each calf individually, flexing foot muscles, flexing hand, forearm, tricep versus bicep, deltoid. It's so interesting to think about. Like the guys that can bounce their pecs up and down can kind of do it. I'm better at both at the same time than individual, but I do think about it sometimes because I'm weird like that. But that shows the mind muscle connection is very ingrained. The myelin is strong there, and that means that you are not only like physically capable, but neurologically capable and connected to utilize that to its full capacity. The more you can do that, the stronger you are in that area. So it's a really cool practice to think about. Like, they talk about progressive muscle relaxation,
Yeah, yeah.
progressive muscle like contraction, like do that from head to toe,
Yeah.
and then you'll relax after the fact. But really focus on the contraction to see how strong you are in the different areas. Fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, and I don't live in Austin. He was in Austin, Texas. I moved out of Austin. I'm now in New York. But, there's another guy I'm working with here as a physical trainer. He's a physical yeah, he's a PT. He's not a trainer, he's a physical therapist. And we're doing some of the very similar work. And once again, I'm like, "Oh, man, I thought I was so much better than I was." Okay, that's okay, I can learn, but, like, there's so much to learn about the body, not just anatomically and physiologically, but actually how they engage the body first person. Yeah,
And I mean, challenges will always be there, and opportunities therefore will always be there. There's
right on.
always something new to learn, something new to train. Stay
Yeah,
curious and find it.
right
We
on.
covered physical pretty well. How about mental?
Yeah, so, let me do emotional first, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I work with clients, and I've been doing this ever since I was a therapist, but 25 years now as a coach, 30 years almost as a therapist, I look at it this way: most people have a series of emotions that they learned in their family of origin that are haram or not appropriate to feel or express. Like, I'll give you something to cry about. Oh, I better not be upset. Or only the father, I can only be angry. Like, that's the message you get. I better, contract against my anger so I don't feel it fully. Whatever guilt, anger, sadness, grief, whatever the thing, joy, happiness. Like some people's family of origin, like, there's nothing to be happy about. This world's hard and there's nothing to smile about. Like, oh fuck, no joy in my life then. So we learn that there's certain emotions that we can't not only feel but we can't express. For me, emotional resilience is the capacity to feel every emotion that's possible as a human being and to learn as necessary to healthily express them. Sometimes you don't necessarily need to express them, contextually dependent. But but also, yeah, if you decide to do it, how do you do that? Road rage is not necessarily the healthiest way of expressing anger because that can get you killed. So right. But still, how can you healthily express anger? So for me, emotional resilience is like, oh, the full range of emotions, learning how to feel, and then healthily express them if it's appropriate. That's the emotional side of things, and that's what I work with my clients on. What
Mm.
are you not learning to feel and express? On the mental side, it's wide variety of different things. Like mental toughness is like, can I focus in on the thing until I'm completed with a task at hand? Or maybe there's micro goals to get to this. This, and I finally hit the thing. When I'm front side focused, offensive mindset, I do the thing. I think that's a huge part of mental resilience, which is getting harder and harder with the technology we have. Like we're focusing is really tough with all the stuff like this this device, right?
Yep.
And whatever else we have going on. Um, so part of it for me is mental resilience is ability to be front side focused and be clear on what our targets are, hit our targets and move toward them with as effective and efficient as possible. But also I think it's complexity of thought. We live in a world which supports binary thinking. You're a Republican or you're a Democrat. You're left or you're right. You're straight or you're gay. You're a man or a woman. I mean, yeah, biologically that's true, but like in terms of ideologies, like you're straight or you're gay. Like we divide people up into these two little camps and we fight each other. It was like whoa. And I don't know if you know this about me. We might have talked about it a little bit, but I spent 20 years doing public policy, a lot of it in national security realm. And I watched these, especially more recently, this crazy shit on social media, and there's no nuance, whether it's cultural issues or political issues or policy issues or any kind of issues, really. There's no nuance. There's no, like, I'm not going to say gray. There's just no nuance in anything. It's either this or that. That's actually a low level complexity in thinking. That's what you find in a child, basically. And understandably so, because you're trying to understand the world and it's a very black and white world. Cool. But we need adults who have transcended the limitations of binary thinking and have more degrees of complexity of thought. Part of the complexity of thought is metacognition. You're able to see your own thinking. So you don't identify with your thoughts. You're like, oh, those are thoughts. But in the Buddhist sense, like thoughts in the like clouds in the sky. Those are my thoughts, my feelings. They just come and go. But like if you can't reflect on your own thoughts, if you can't understand nuance in other people's thinking, understand where they come from, why they believe they do, they're not necessarily evil human beings, although there are some evil human beings, but like they have experiences, they have worldviews, they have perspectives. There's a whole bunch of forces that led them to believe what they believe, family of origin, culture, nationality, ethnicity, religion, whatever the things are. If you can start understanding that and have more complexity in your thought for yourself and for other people, you become much more resilient. Why? Because you're no longer pushed by the forces external to you. You're free of that, and you're able to play with them to a certain extent. For me, that's part of complexity of cognition or mental resilience.
Man, so much there.
Sure, sorry,
We could
I kinda went off on
no,
that tangent there.
no, we could spend 2 hours on each of these domains. We're only halfway through them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's so much I wanna comment on. I mean, your last part, complexity of thought, like you said, we draw these invisible lines where you're either with us or against us. You're on this team or you're on that team, and we create tribes where they are unnecessarily needed. But we also remove our ability to independently think when we do that, which is why I'm always more curious in someone who doesn't fall into a neat little box, whether it's in the political realm, and even sometimes like faith and religion is important, but I always like curiosity and open mindedness and not rigidity of thought.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean like you can't be religious. I think it's a beautiful thing.
100%.
And belief in God and a higher power is very important. Believing in things outside of yourself.
Mhm.
But when you close your mind so much to any other possibility, you're going to other anyone else who's not with you in that, even if it's not apparent in your actions. If it's even in your beliefs, you other everyone else. And that just leads the downstream inability to think outside the box that you've created, maybe unnecessarily so for the life that you could live to its fullest potential. I love that. The ability to focus these days, my goodness, it's a skill that can be trained, by the way. So you do
Okay.
things like a 50-mile ruck, and whatever it may be, challenging yourself where you are focused on just one domain, and you can do that for a sustained amount of time without interruption unless it's from your kids, which I get to deal with quite a bit because I have kids that like to interrupt me, but I
Yeah,
still
yeah.
find those pockets where nothing else other than the focus or maybe complete lack of focus and just opening my mind and letting it wander, so beneficial. But it's getting harder and harder to do.
And at some point, if we have time tonight, highlight what you just said in terms of like the space for non-clear think like not clear thinking. The space where creativity can emerge because you're not doing the linear thinking. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's really, really vital, especially in a culture where we just fill our there's a lot of noise in the system. There's little space for quietude and self-reflection and curiosity or boredom. Like boredom is such a good thing, but we don't
Yes.
allow it to occur because that's where the novelty can, for many people, emerge. Yeah, yeah,
My kids tell me that they're bored, and I always respond with, "You're lucky. That's awesome. Take advantage of it." 'Cause we
yeah,
we we talk about it, and I really like it. I mean, I got it first from Viktor Frankl, but stimulus response,
yeah.
and it's true, we very much operate in stimulus response, and how can you make that stimulus, at least the response, delayed when it's not urgent and life-threatening, so you can add space between that to have an effectively rational response rather than a subconscious emotional reaction. So I like using that in classes that I teach, but man, sometimes, how about no stimulus? And just see what happens. No stimulus whatsoever, or a stimulus that you don't have to think much about. Because a lot of the creative thoughts come to me maybe earlier today on the assault bike for an hour, but low, moderate intensity. And all I'm
Yeah.
doing is that. But man, the thoughts that come to me are when I'm sitting in the sun. And thanks to my buddy Sam Alimo, I now have a waterproof notebook in the sun with me because when thoughts come up, I write them down there because I was always like, I wish on my phone so I could write down a note or a thought. And
That's
so
great.
beneficial. But either a stimulus that I'm not really paying attention to or no stimulus at all, so I can truly wander and see what comes to my mind. It's always a beneficial practice when I make it happen.
So I want to highlight various kinds of intuition, transrational intuition. I want to get to in a second, but I want to go back to something you said in terms of tribal. If you look at developmental literature, there's 21 lines of development. We develop emotional through various stages, cognitive through various stages, moral through various stages, self-sense through various stages. And we start out, and I just want to speak to the tribal piece real quick. Self-centered. Like a baby has to be self-centered because they just have immediate needs, gratification, food, warmth, hydration, sleep, those kind of things. You hope that they grow out of it. Some you might run into some adults who are just intermediate gratification, which indicates to me that they haven't really matured a lot. But okay, once you transcend the egocentric thing, you become ethnocentric or tribal centric. Is you and your group. And it's you and your family. It could be you and your peer group. These are young people. But you also find this culturally too. Like it's my tribe against your tribe. We've had a history of that as a human species. We still find it today. That hasn't changed. We still find a lot of tribal wars. And I don't mean tribal in an ancient sense of these groups in Africa running around fighting tribes. Like no, like the religious tribes fighting each other, tribes within various religions fighting each other. The I won't get into history and stuff, but tribal warfare is not uncommon, especially even today. If you look at the next stage of possible development within human beings, it goes from egocentric to sociocentric to world centric. It's no longer about me and my tribe. It's about all human beings. I can put myself in anyone's shoe and realize like, they have dignity. We should give them respect, depending on their behavior, of course. But like just because they're from a different religion, different part of the world, different whatever, doesn't mean I have to automatically discount them as a human being. And if you want to be Buddhist, you can have the Bodhisattva vow, and you can put all sentient beings in there, not just human beings. But the thing is, you become more expansive in your inclusiveness of other human beings as you hopefully evolve and adapt and grow over time. I
Yeah,
think it's important to throw this in the conversation because it helps explain possibly why we're so tribal these days. Because a lot of people have not transcended into a world centric place, or because of the stresses we find in our culture, they regress to an earlier stage of development, which is more tribal in nature.
yeah, and you've described beautifully, like the ability to empathize outside of the circles that you deeply care about,
Yeah,
and just consider someone else's perspective,
yeah,
um, and whether or not you're right, as long as it's believable, and as long as it's safe and there's no threat to your
yeah,
safety or others.
yeah, of course.
Most people having a hard time, are most people giving anyone a hard time, are having a hard time, and most people you disagree with do so for reasons that you probably would quite agree with if you had their experience. So that empathy is not easy, but man, when you can start doing that outside of your respective realms, it removes so much unnecessary stress and burden on you selfishly. And then selflessly, you connect with more people, you create more connections, and you make a bigger impact on this world. Pretty simple concept, very, very difficult to implement, particularly when you have patterns like I did and do in some ways where I still struggle. Like,
Well, and it speaks to resilience. The more expansive you are and connected to other human beings in a supportive, possibly accountable way, there's more resilience built into social ecological systems you're engaged in, which is awesome. Well, let's get back to like the interpersonal thing with a spouse. I'm trained as a marriage and family therapist, and I still work with a lot of couples, and I talk to the men. They're like, "Oh, I'm sovereign. I make my own decisions." And he's into his masculine, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, "That's great." I say, so when your wife says or does that thing, and you get really upset, and you shut down and take your toys and go home, or you come a little aggressive, not physically aggressive, but like a little, that kind of thing. So you're not sovereign. You're just reactive stimulus and response to your wife. That's a lack of power. That's not. It's not you don't have power. It's a lack of power. And the point in bringing that up, we can talk about couples if you want, but it's like ultimately, if you're reactive to the other tribe out there, and I don't mean for safety reasons. Yes, of course, you need to protect yourself and your family, whatever. But most of the stuff is verbal in nature, is not like a real threat to your life. If you're reactive to them, you're not free. You're literally, and you're not sovereign,
yep, you're a slave to your
which means
triggers.
you're not resilient.
Yep.
Yeah, you're just being pushed around by things out there.
And you transitioned into the social realm beautifully there, but it ties into emotional resilience so well. And I really appreciate how you discuss kind of the tie. I wrote a piece a while ago, and it was on old school mental toughness and new school emotional resilience.
Nice.
And old school mental toughness, don't feel it all. New school emotional intelligence, when you let the pendulum swing too far, overexpress any feeling you may have, no matter how slight. And nuance. You said that word several times, and it's so important. That is a very important word. And whether you use gray and whatever that middle ground is, just like the lines that we draw, that middle ground often is the place that you want to be operating when it comes to the tribal nature and the boxes that we create necessarily. So, but man, to fully experience and feel your emotions or your feelings, and then rationally or in a healthy manner express them. What a great way to provide nuance, because it's going to be conceptually, couldn't put it better. Specifically, it's going to be different for each feeling and each emotion, each context. You got to consider a lot of things. But if you can't feel, you're not going to function well. If you overexpress, good luck maintaining connections or being a responsible, productive individual in this life. But when you find that balance, emotional intelligence is feeling, rationally managing, and then expressing the way that you need to be human.
Yes, yes, yes. We're definitely in complete agreement. So what I like to kind of jokingly say, feel your feelings. Doesn't mean you have to act on them. You're not three. You don't have to throw a tantrum. What's your ethos? What's your code of conduct? Use that to help guide you in how you want to express. And I'll say to people, and I love the middle path, probably because my study of Buddhism for 50 years now. Actually, shoot, almost 50 years. The middle path. But for some, if they start at one extreme, I will find that they need to go to the other extreme to find the middle path. So, for instance, if someone is a road rager, they might have to go all the way to the other side of just like not nothing, and then find the middle path. Okay. Or if someone's just completely shut down, they might have to learn how to like be. And when I say road rage, I mean driving a car and start screaming, yelling at people. I'm just using that as a metaphor, but like they're shut down and they learn how to let this stuff out in a objectively like inappropriate way, right? But it's a practice until they can find the middle path that might be necessary for them. And the idea is like, oh, how do you find a safe space so they can practice that? Now, maybe it's inside their marriage, if it's a safe place for their spouse, for them to practice this new way of being in the world until they find that middle path. Maybe it's with a therapist. Maybe it's the first time they're ever screaming and yelling with a therapist. Not, I don't mean physically violent with a therapist, but like, there's certain somatic practices where you beat the pillow or punch the pillow or scream into the pillow because you've never actually dealt with your anger, and maybe you need to learn how to feel and express it. So when it actually starts coming up in the future, you're not either repressing it because you're afraid of it, because you're afraid of hurting someone, or you're so overly expressive you hurt someone. You don't, that's not really helpful either. So like, you got to practice maybe kind of the extremes so you can find a middle path.
And those healthy releases, they feel so good when you can do them safely and in a good place. I don't know if they call it scream therapy or whatever the hell it is, but man, when I can scream from the depths of my stomach and soul, so like when I'm in the car and it's just been tough, just roar as loud as I can, maybe to the point where I'm damaging my vocal folds. My speech therapist's wife would give me a hard time for doing it that hard, and I have a raspy voice. But boy, does it feel good to have that release. And of course, you can do that through physical exertion or in other ways. But man, let it out. Quit trying to suppress that shit down, because it'll affect you in other ways until you blow up irrationally. But you can rationally emote. You can rationally let it out. And boy, does it feel good in the ways that are beneficial for you when you do it, especially when you do it on purpose, not reactively because you can't take it anymore. Stress is not linear. I used to think it was. I can
Yeah.
I'm building up, boom, you caused it. It's not my fault. I just can't take it anymore. Like, actually, you can. You just have the wrong framing within it. But man, take your breaks, recover in whatever way, if it's through expressing fully, if it's whatever it might be, good night's sleep. But man, when you can express rationally and then come back and function rationally in those difficult realms, which social would be, arguably, we're pretty good at taking on challenges on purpose when it's for our own self improvement. But it involves others. It's always so interesting to talk to people. They're always more concerned on the other person, what they're contributing, rather than themselves. And that is hard, to admit your shortcomings, to admit your opportunities, but it is so empowering and connective to the other person, because you're influencing them by owning your own shit and then working on that. And go figure, the other person might do that too with you.
Well, man, it's like, where do we go with this? Because you just brought up all kinds of really cool stuff. I look over your left shoulder and I see Mark's book. And Mark had a concept that he promotes called 20x. You can do 20 times more than you think you can do. 100%. I think it's awesome. When I spent a decade working for them, I came up with a concept called negative 20x. Like, why would you want to do 20x less than you could think you can do? Well, and this kind of speaks to what you just said in terms of self-reflection, but I'll contextualize it in physical activity. So you can imagine who gets attracted to steel fit. Oh, and type AAA personality. I can't wait to do the next hard physical thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's awesome. And I remember I had a client, love the guy, and he's like, did Copro. He wants to do another Copro camp or next Spartan race. And I'm just watching him over time. I'm thinking, what crossed my mind kind of intuitively, like, what's he running from? It's one thing to get excited about the next physical challenge and train up for it, but it seemed as if, I'm exploring with this with him, there's something else driving this thing. So I said, all right, instead of like 20X, let's do the next thing. And blah, blah, blah. I said, maybe your next thing is to do nothing. Goes back to the quietude and the silence and stuff. Instead of training hours and hours a day for the next thing, I want you to spend some of that time not training at all. I mean, yeah, just train for health, like half an hour a day, not your couple hours a day, so you can remain healthy. But like, that extra time that you would put into training, I just want you to sit and meditate. I want you to go for walks. I want you to journal. He fucking hated that at the very beginning because he was so driven to drive himself to do the thing that sitting quietly was really hard for him. And what he discovered in our work together was two things: the voice that drove him to really to be the triple A personality, not just a single A personality, was his father. He was trying to prove something unconsciously to his father. If I just did the next thing, if I just did the next thing, his father was dead. And like his father wasn't even there to like say good job or bad job. It was like, but that's the driver. And you realize like, holy shit, most of those things I've been doing in my life have been driven by that thing. Okay, cool. Now you know we did a little bit of work around that, and the drive didn't disappear. You still like to do hard physical things, great, but he wasn't as crazily driven. Not only was he not as crazily driven, which is healthy for him because he was by this time in his 50s, and he's got to be mindful of his physical capabilities. He also realized that he was also running from conversations that he never had with his mom who's still alive. And he started having those kind of conversations with his mom. If he had done the next hard physical thing and ignored our work, he would have done great on that hard physical thing, but wouldn't have the insight he had around what really drives him. So he kind of calm his nervous system down and not be so sympathetic to be activated all the time. And he changes his dynamic with his mom. As a therapist coach, I'm like, that's great. Maybe someone else from the outside looking in and go, wait, I liked him when he was doing crazy ass shit all the time. Like, okay.
Beautiful story. And applying that capacity that he has to do hard physical things to doing the hard conversations with something else that he values, which is why self reflection and genuine, honest, deep, uncomfortable self-reflection about where you currently doing well. What are your opportunities? What are your values? And don't list one. Don't tell me about how good you are at running and you're a runner. What are your identities that are important to you in all these different lanes that we're talking about, and even lanes within lanes? And how are you filling each of those buckets by showing up where you are kicking ass as a runner in the Spartan races and the Kokoro? How are you applying those lessons to these other domains? Because if you're not showing up there, you're not earning anything. You have
Yeah.
the capacity, but you're not earning anything with your mother, with your spouse, with your family, at work by getting after it. Don't get me wrong. You're getting better in that way, but
Yeah.
it's not translating. Like you said, what are you running from in this example, which is perfect. And it's so interesting because we all have the ability and the potential to do it, but we find our hard and then we get really good at that. And then we don't pursue other productive hard in ways that we can really quickly illuminate with some self reflection our opportunities. Now we just got to reorient and apply there.
And be expansive with that because like I work with corporate leaders a good bit of the time, and they're like hugely successful as entrepreneurs. Like they're front side focused, offensive mindset. They do the thing. Like they're hugely successful. Their health sucks. They're in this case is a man. Their wife doesn't really talk to them that much,
Yeah.
and their kids like, who the hell's my father? I never see him around. That kind of stuff. I'm like, can we take what you're like this amazing drive and vision and capacity you have as an entrepreneur and apply it to your health, apply it to your marriage, apply it to your family life across domains. Now, it does like the mindset can apply across the skill set might not do so.
Correct.
Well,
Yes.
how
I
you relate
like
to your
that.
wife is a lot different
That's a
than how
good
you.
quote.
What's
That's a
that?
good quote. That's a
Yeah.
good quote.
Okay.
I
So
like that a lot.
there's some skills that need to be developed, but the mindset to be the same. And I think it's really important because we seem to silo ourselves, whether it's for information and education and beliefs, like the tribal thing, or if it's like I'm so good at this thing, but like you said way early in the conversation, but we don't apply it elsewhere, like in the marriage or the health or the family life or whatever religious life, whatever is important to you. You claim to be important to you, but you're not actually not doing the thing. You're just doing that one lane.
And divorce rates are high these days for a variety of reasons, but they've always been higher in the military. You always see them higher with CEOs and Fortune 500 like company successful individuals. You
Yeah.
tend to see, at least professionally successful, athletically successful, you tend to see relationships not do as well on average. There are exceptions to every rule for sure, but you have to imagine that the mindset is not translating that well, or new skills being developed in those domains are not well. And but that doesn't mean, I think I also could empathize that you have this knowledge and wisdom that you need to put forth tons of hours and effort to grow these skills, and you just don't have the time to do that at home, or you don't have the time to do that for your own personal health, whatever the reason might be where you're struggling. But man, an hour of presence, some intention, effort, and consistency over time, and it's amazing where you can get in a few weeks, a month, let alone a few years. And if you're struggling in your marriage and that's important to you, but you work 12 hours a day, man, challenging conversations, deep conversations, talking about your values and your spouse's values, understanding each other's why, where you're aligning, where you're not, and what can be done realistically in the moment. It's so interesting with the people I work with to tap into, like, hey, the mindset doesn't need to be the skill sets and the time that you put toward developing them in the same way. You like you said it beautifully. The mindset can translate, but you got to uniquely apply it with different skills in that domain of opportunity.
Yeah, because I would hope you speak to your spouse different than an underling. Hope. Or your
I hope.
boss. Yeah, like, I don't know, maybe.
So we covered physical, we covered mental and emotional. We kind of use that to bridge into some of the social. If there's nothing else that you wanted to cover in social, it's definitely weaved in with spiritual quite a bit. But I'm interested in what else you would have to say about spiritual.
Yeah, spiritual and then interpersonal specific to, like, your primary relationship with your wife or your husband or your partner. But the spiritual thing. So spiritual for me has a couple different meanings. Now, part one of the meanings could be, depending on the individual I'm working with, their spiritual practice, their spiritual belief system. So I have clients who have multiple different from different religions. And if they say to me religion, their spiritual life is important to them, I take that really seriously. And I always ask questions and we track things because I have a journal and stuff like that. They claim these are their values and their principles, and here's what they're doing. Is there an alignment? If they claim that the relationship to God in a particular religious faith is important to them, but they're not doing anything in that space, I have to ask some questions. Or they claim like, yeah, eating a healthy diet's important to me, whatever that means, and they explain what that means. And they eat McDonald's all the time. I'm like, like we should have that conversation because either your you your values are not really your own. You're just claiming them for whatever performative reasons or indoctrination reasons or whatever they happen to be. Or maybe they are, but you just don't know how to align your behaviors behind them. Let's have that conversation. Okay. So when I work with a client and they're part of a their religious system with a spiritual life, I help support that. Doesn't matter what I believe. So, like for instance, I have a client who's Greek Orthodox, and we spent a lot of time talking about the Greek Orthodox tradition and his prayer. This Greek Orthodox has some amazing books on the heart. He reads, and we talk about that prayer and meditation, and he tries to live a life based on the teachings of the particular that church. But I've also had other Christian sects, Muslim, Buddhist, all the various things. But like to me, it's like, are you living a life that you claim is important to you based on your religious practices? And I have to support that. So part of that for me is the spiritual context. Another thing is what do you claim your values are? Not necessarily as part of a church, although it can be derived from a church or a synagogue or a mosque, whatever it is. But you claim that these values are important, these principles are important to it. Honesty, integrity, courage, bravery, care, compassion, empathy, whatever the things are. All right, are you living them? Let's see, how are you embodying those principles, whether they're religiously driven or not? And we spent large amount of time talking about that because if you are in alignment, you're much more resilient. You know, you talked about you brought up why a little bit ago, WHY, like why do you do what you do? What's your why? And you wrote about this recently on Substack, I believe, right?
Yep.
So, it's one of the things we did a lot of self is like, what's your why? And you brought up Viktor Frankl. Once you know your why, you can almost survive anything. I mean, you can survive the whole, the Holocaust, the death camps. because he knew his why, right? So if he can do it, hopefully none of us are in those kind of positions, less threats in their environment, but we can still have some adversity. If we know our why, we can really push through whatever the thing is. That's resilience. Like if you know your why, if you know your values and your principles, and you stick to them, what's your ethical code, what's your ethos, that can help drive you through some really, really hard times because you know you're doing the right thing based on your code. So the second piece of that is kind of your code of conduct, your ethos. Let me just stop there because there's other pieces of it too.
Brother, I'm learning so much tonight. You're updating my toolkit in so many ways, but
Nice.
very powerful here. So, um, I write on intentional stress or using the stress response to train the skill that is resilience. So, intentionally pursuing something that makes you a little uncomfortable at a manageable level for a short period of time in whatever domain, like the ones we've been talking about, an area of opportunity for you. Get a little uncomfortable, do it consistently with intention and effort. And then as you get more comfortable, progressively overload that if it is productive for you in your life.
Right.
And my favorite intentional stress challenge when it comes to the spiritual domain would be self-reflection and writing down your values. It was one of the first things I learned over 10 years ago now when I got trained in the formal program for the Navy Marine Corps to
Mm,
be a stress management instructor. It was just a simple core values exercise. And there's hundreds of them online. And usually they have about 100 different values and you can add in your own. And we are challenged with picking out six of those 100. They all look great. We had to pick six. So challenging in and of itself. And once you pick six that most apply to you, rank order them from number one to highest priority in your life down to six. And that was even more challenging yet. And it was just a reflective exercise there. And what I did was I then took that. Maybe we had discussions. I'm forgetting. I'm acting like I did it. And I'm sure I read it. We stand on the shoulder of giants. I have no original ideas. But what I like to do with clients now and people I work with is okay, now take your six values and further self reflect on where are your behaviors and actions aligning with them and where are the gaps, where are the opportunities. But what I have not been doing that you emphasize so beautifully is before we start talking about alignment and behaviors, why are those your values? Where are they coming from? And man, it's so obvious, but I've never
mm,
had the language behind it or thought to ask that question, um, even though I've been doing it for myself, but I haven't asked that question to other people because a lot of our values that we think we have are either given to us in our childhood and we hold on to them and we never really grapple with them and kind of reassess the why and how it applies to our life, or maybe it comes from uh, our religion or our political institutions or whatever it may be. And you don't have to blindly align with everything that comes from these systems, even though you have the faith in the religion or you agree with most of the stuff in the politics, but assessing the why in the value before you
right.
start talking about alignment, because you might need to reassess the value. Powerful, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. And it kind of goes to the socio-cultural realm too. Just to highlight what you just said. I won't judge someone. I'm hardly judging my own people anyways, unless they give me a certain criteria they want me to judge them against, and we have that conversation. That's a different conversation. But if someone comes to me and they say, I believe X, Y, and Z, and kind of do a deeper dive, you're like, oh wait, that's what my father believed, and I don't necessarily believe that anymore. Okay. Or that's what my religious institution believed, or when I was in elementary school, that's my teacher taught me, or whatever the thing is. Like, hey, self-reflection is so important and make a determination, and you still might come to the same conclusion. Oh, yeah, I do believe that. Awesome, cool. But if you come to the conclusion that I don't believe that, but you still have to be performative and pretend like you do, your why is so weak. That's not going to be a resilience enhancing activity. And the other piece of that too, and my clients are probably annoyed by this, abstract to concrete. I say that all the effing time. Abstract to concrete. So I remember I was working with a couple, and the woman said, "I want you to be more supportive of me." And he's like, I'd been working with him for a while, so he knew to say, well, "What's that mean for you? What's it mean to be supportive?" And she's like, kind of stuck. She's like, "I don't know." Like she sat with it for a while. Thank goodness she was reflective, and she's like, "I don't know how to tell you that." And he's like, "Well, if you can't tell me, I can't do it if I wanted to." And I found out with a lot of values. Like I want to be more courageous. What's it actually mean in terms of behavior? I want to be more loving. What's that actually look like? I want to be more present with my spouse. Awesome. What do you mean by being present? Like, we'll stick with the present one because I work with couples. I'm like, and someone will say, I want to be more, like most of the guys says, I want to be more present with my wife because she's would like me to be more present. I'm like, what's that mean? I don't know. I'll be more present. Well, let's break that down. Let's break concrete thing. And it might be like, okay, I'm not going to be on my phone when I talk to her. I'm going to do eye contact. I'm not going to be walking away and barely listening to her. like here's 3 or 4 characteristics of me being present. Now, if it's interpersonal, you might want to ask her. If she wants you to be more present, what does that mean for her? So you can be really clear. And that, do you want to do those behaviors? Yes, add them to your list. Well, no, that's a conversation. But if like, hey, here's the 5 characteristics of me being more present. 3 of them from her. She agrees with my 2. Here's the 5. Then you can assess. Am I actually doing the thing? Am I being more courageous? Here's the 5 criteria for me being courageous, more loving, more present, whatever the thing is. But if you can't be concrete, then it's like saying, "Hey, I want to be healthy. I'm going to work with you and get stronger." Well, what the fuck does that mean? I want to be more fit. Like, oh, what's that mean for you? Like, unless you give me something concrete, we can't get a baseline to determine where you're at, and we can't assess you over time. And hopefully, you show improvement. I'll stop there.
Abstract to concrete.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, as I mentioned already, I love intentional stress challenges
I know.
and the frame that I use for it. But this is not a new concept. And this is my concrete way of explaining the abstract concept that's been around for a long time. One of the first ways that, or at least one of my first awareness of the concept, and maybe I'm sure he learned it from someone else, but Musonius Rufus, back in the day, Epictetus's teacher,
Mm,
Stoic philosopher, would talk about voluntary discomfort, and that would be to hunger, to the cold, physical training, writing, thinking, exercising virtue, all of these amazing concepts that he wrote so practically and specifically on. But I like using the frame of intentionally stressing your body. So my definition of resilience, by the way, and I really enjoyed yours. My simplistic mind and the way that I like to break it down, because you said the exact same things that are in my definition, but my very short definition would be resilience is the ability to effectively manage and recover from stress.
perfect.
And now you can use that stress, whether that's in the different domains we've talked about, but it has the strategies for managing it when it's there, and you can feel them and express them in the ways that you manage them. And just managing whatever the stressor might be that's causing the stress response, because you wouldn't stress if you didn't care about the stress in the first place. So there's a lot of reflection that you can do proactively ahead of the time, but effectively manage, but most importantly, recover from stress. Because if you never recover, even from that, we all know the example, me holding up the water bottle throughout our podcast. I could do that no problem. Now we have a podcast for 4 days straight. I'm going to be pretty weak about it anyways, because I'm one, if I don't sleep very well, that's one of my biggest opportunities to be more resilient is when I'm tired. And I know you learned that quite a bit at Kokoro Camp and elsewhere. But I can manage mild stressors for a while, but eventually that'll take its toll and I can't manage it any longer. And that's true of all of us. We need recovery from the stress response. And then that's where the growth can happen to in the recovery stage, just like with physical training.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when I first started listening to you and JC Glick, one of the first things that I saw from you guys is you were doing your own version of challenges to improve capacity in different domains. When did you guys start doing that? Because I found that I've been writing on Substack for a while, but I just love seeing these convergence of ideas, especially from experts like you guys and how you apply them. I was like, hell yeah, this gives me confirmation that at least I'm somewhat on the right path in some of these things that I'm doing.
That's a great memory. Man, we did that years ago.
Yeah.
I was still living in Virginia before we hit the road. I remember that 'cause I can literally picture myself where I was shooting the videos with JC, and we'd come up with, like, short little, kind of vignettes of either mental emotional challenges or hard physical challenges. But before I go down that path, I'd be remiss not to point out you offer monthly on Substack, at least. I'm sure it's also on Twitter. Actually, I think it's probably on LinkedIn too, your monthly physical challenges.
I do it primarily through Substack. I don't
Okay.
think I put them on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Actually, no,
I throw shit on there that usually my
right,
quote reflections, but I
it's
do it
right.
with my functional fitness group, which I do locally. So I've been doing it for several years, but I started putting them on Substack. But they're just micro challenges that take 10 minutes or less, typically in the physical domain. And I typically try to make them easy enough to do in the morning to start your day. Sometimes it is more mental, but I'll write larger challenges in those other domains. But find a way. I love physical intentional stress because to train every domain together, physical, mental, social, and spiritual, you have to have physical. Now, the
Yes,
social, if you're really outgoing, you like to be with others, do it in solitude. Now you got your social stressor. And if you're really asocial, if you're an introvert and it takes more energy to be around other people's, take some classes. And that won't be part of my daily intentional stress challenge, but you can train all of those capacities beneficially for the purpose of building resilience and then the other advantages that come from physical exercise and benefits to your health. That's just a byproduct of the pursuit in the first place. So this month we're doing some neck enhancing mobility without any weights whatsoever, just moving the neck in different planes. And I love the idea that it doesn't take long every day to put in a few minutes to improve some aspect of your life, but you're doing it intentionally because it's a little bit hard and then you get more comfortable with that. And you're learning you can do hard things and get more comfortable with it. By the end of the month, it's not it's a walk in the park to do what is initially hard for you. And that's just 30 days. And now you can start remembering that and apply it to other aspects of your life, like you mentioned earlier in this
Yeah,
talk.
right. Yeah, actually, now I think about it, I'm going to put you out on Twitter. I push
Thank you, brother.
I push your monthly, stuff out on Twitter. Yeah, and actually on LinkedIn is all your quotes, 'cause you do some great quotes and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Very true. So JC and I, man, we should probably go back and start doing those again, 'cause those were fun. We just realized that kinda like what who's the comfort guy? Michael,
Easter.
Easter. I love his work, loved his book. JC and I recognize even before his book came out, like that we have a tendency as human beings, especially here in the West, especially in America, to seek comfort. And it's when we make ourselves uncomfortable, that's where the growth occurs. And we're like, oh, let's contribute to making people uncomfortable.
Hell
That's
yeah.
where we came up, like, let's do these little videos and challenge people over time. But I'll tell you something really funny about JC. If you ever interview him, I want you to ask him about this. So cohort number 2 for our men's group was last year. One of the guys was talking to me, da, 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 da. JC goes, I don't want you to be uncomfortable. And I said, JC, I want him to be uncomfortable. I said, the combat veteran with 11 tours of combat doesn't want someone to be uncomfortable. Ranger, like, you spent how many months and years uncomfortable? Maybe that's why he doesn't want people to be uncomfortable, because he went through all this stuff. And me, like the therapist guy, who's supposed to make people feel comfortable. I want people to be uncomfortable. So we had this like really interesting back and forth between like, okay, there's some value in people being comfortable, and there's some value in people being uncomfortable. But in terms of the challenges that you referred to, that he and I did years and years ago, that's making people uncomfortable. And
So I first heard about those challenges after, again, our friend Marcus Reyes Anderson linked us
right.
up after I got to meet him and talk to him a few times. And so I went back and listened to your podcast. You had him on your podcast. You were on his several times. And I believe it was when you're on his that you brought that up. And then I looked him up. And yeah, you guys had some meditative ones where you're just in solitude, some deep breathing exercises, and of course, some physical ones too. And you guys should definitely bring that back. And it would be an honor to talk to JC at some point too.
I'll hook you guys up for sure. Yeah,
Appreciate you, brother.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's funny. Like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Like, I might not want to make you uncomfortable physically because I'm trying to make you uncomfortable mentally, and we can just focus on that area. But the intent behind intentional stress is I want to make you comfortable with what originally made you uncomfortable. And the only way to
Yes,
do that
yes,
is
yeah,
manageable discomfort. And I hate the word safe, but I do mean safe. I want you to physically be safe. I don't want this to take on unnecessary risk.
right.
But psychologically, I don't want you to feel safe. I want it to feel stressful. And I want you to train your body and your mind that the stress response is not danger bad all the time. It can be that for our prediction and perception of threats when we need to use it. But
Yeah,
hey, those bills, that comment from your boss, the issues at home, they need addressed, but they are not life threatening. They don't require rumination that compromises your sleep, your diet, your movement, and every other aspect of your life where you're screwing yourself over because of something that feels overwhelming, but really it's just a perception that you have. And the more you can get comfortable feeling uncomfortable, the more you can rationally approach uncomfortable situations to effectively manage them until you recover from them and be
that
resilient.
that's well said, and that's a great segue to the interpersonal resilience, actually. You mind if I just share a piece of the,
Please, please.
because that's perfect. So, I work with couples, but even inside the men's group, we'll say, part of resilience, besides all the physical stuff, which is fun and awesome, is like, how can you sit through an experience for long periods of time without seeking distraction? Cool. Interpersonal, men seem to have a strong desire to fix their partner when their partner seems uncomfortable. Heterosexual married relationship. The wife is doing her thing, and he's like, I got to fix you. Like, how can we solve this problem? And I always ask the guy, are you doing this because you feel uncomfortable with her being uncomfortable? Or are you doing this because you really want to help her? And usually, if he's honest, like, it's a little bit of both. Yeah, I love her and I care for her, and I want her to be resolved the thing. And it makes me really uncomfortable with her being all over the place and anxious and stressed and emotional, which really the emotionality makes me a lot of men uncomfortable. Okay, cool. Hey, I love your heart that you want to help her. The piece of it that you You don't like feeling that way, that's about you. That's not about her. Okay. Now, how can we teach the men to sit in their own experience longer periods of time and hold the space for their wife? Meaning, like the wife is doing the very feminine thing, the emotions are all over the place. Can a man hold the space for her without getting acted or triggered? Trigger is kind of a very common psychology word. So you get triggered, you know. Can you sit and hold the space for her and find out what she actually needs from you? Not what you think she needs. Ask her. 'Cause what she needs now might be different than 5 minutes from now or 5 days from now. If you ask her, hey, what can I do for you right now? She might say, nothing, just listen. She might say, reflect back to what you hear me saying. I just need to hear my own voice out because I need to talk through these with someone. Cool. I need you to help resolve this problem. Cool. Whatever the thing is, don't assume what you know what your wife needs. Ask her. And then show up as best as you can to provide that for her if you want to. Hopefully you do 80% of the time. So 20% of the time you're like, fuck it, I'm out. Okay. Because you're not always fully capable of doing whatever thing needs to get done because you're a human being. Like you can't be perfect. There's no such thing. 80-20, 90-10 is pretty good. But in order for you to hold the space for her and be able to ask her questions, be really deeply curious, you have to manage your own nervous system. If you get activated and your defense mechanism is to shut down and take your toys and go home, or to get aggressive, either one of those things or some other version of that, whatever that is for you, doesn't serve you well. And it's a learned behavior. It's what you do. I'm not judging it, but that's what you learn how to do. But it definitely doesn't serve her or the relationship well. So part of the resilience is learning how to be open, hold the space, be really curious, not as a lawyer driving the conversation to the conclusion you wanted. You have to actually be really curious and managing yourself in the process. And managing yourself in the process is not denying how you feel. Oh, I'm going to repress my feelings. I'm aware of them. I'm a witness to them. I'm an observer. I think in the meditative sense, I'm observing all the stuff happening inside of me. Maybe it's the time interpersonally to deal with it while she's dealing with her stuff. If it's appropriate. Maybe it's like, no, I'm going to put this aside. Be there for her. And maybe an hour from now or 2 hours from now, or maybe later today or tomorrow, I'll bring it back up and we can discuss. Whatever seems appropriate to the context of the communication that's going on and the issues are being discussed. But you don't want to not deal with it. Maybe it's something you take to your therapist. Maybe it's something you journal about. Maybe it's something you just internally process on your own. Maybe take to a coach. Whatever it is, like don't deny it. Don't pretend like it's not there. You eventually have to deal with it, even if you deal with it in that moment. That's interpersonal resilience because if you're capable of doing that for her, he's capable of doing that for you. You really strengthen that dyad, that relationship. And when I work with my couple, let's say you want to go from me to we. If it's we, me and you against the problem, that's so much stronger and more powerful, more resilient than I'm right, she's wrong, vice versa. I'm going to protect my identity till the end because I know I'm right and she's wrong or whatever. And I'm going to fight back and forth, not physically, but like I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to prove him wrong. And once she capitulates, then I know I won. Okay, cool. If you're a lawyer, that's great. You can do that shit in court. If you're married, that doesn't really serve the marriage very well. It's me and you against the challenge. It's a we. If you can get into it as a mindset, there's also a physical state of the nervous system, you're much more resilient.
Very hard to support others when you're dysregulated. Even if your intentions are pure, if you cannot manage your own stuff internally, it's going to spill out externally in ways that are not rational and effective. I've since getting married to my wife, and even when I was dating her, and I knew I wanted to marry her, I've taken my role as protector and provider, first of her and now our children, very seriously. But dichotomies to all things, and you can even take that perspective too far. Will you protect them? Ironically, for me, from the very thing that I write and preach about, which is experiencing discomfort
Yeah.
so you can become more resilient. What you just described has been my biggest opportunity, and you could argue maybe still is in my life, where I try to prevent, manage, or support my wife in ways that I think she needs without just showing up as bad cop if it's a kid issue, or take care of the problems before it's asked for in her life. And while sometimes it is what she needs, but it's because she's asked for it, oftentimes it's not. She just needs my presence. She needs my curiosity. She needs me rationally there to support whatever way is needed when I am around. So if I come home from work and things are challenging, I don't need to ramp up and make it worse and then get dysregulated. That doesn't help at all. It makes it harder. And
Yeah.
then I force her into having to do something and then not feeling and expressing her emotions. I force her to have to be good cop if I go bad cop. Everything you just said there resonates with me personally, but it's so powerful for anyone when it comes to the simple concept of regulation first and then showing up for the people that you care about with curiosity and empathy to try and understand their perspective and what is truly needed. And sometimes it's just waiting and being patient to listen.
Well, and you're gonna love this, and you'll get it. But I had a lot of couples who are like, "I don't, what the fuck are you talking about?" So when I work with couples, I started asking in my broader philosophical framework. I have 4 pillars: physiological, psychological, social, and environmental. We didn't even talk about the environmental resilience, but on the physiological side, I'll ask for individuals and couples questions on sleep, diet, nutrition, fitness, movement, stress management, and circadian biology, the 24-hour day-night cycles. And at first, a lot of couples were like, "Why are you asking us about our diets and sleep? All the things." And once they finally get it, I know you'll get this because if you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, you're stressed well, you're not moving, your circadian biology is all fucked up because of the exogenous chemicals or artificial things, lights and stuff. You're just your whole. It's not even your emotions are dysregulated. Your whole physiology is dysregulated. It's hard to show up in a loving, caring, compassionate way with your spouse if your whole system's fucked up to some degree or another. But if you start dialing your sleep, most important one, I love Dr. Kirk Parsley. He's a sleep dude that I go to all the time. And your fitness, your movement, your stress management, your circadian biology, all diet, nutrition. You start dialing those things in, and you feel better. You're less dysregulated, more vitality. You're not angry. Blood sugars are kind of stabilized. You're much more capable inside your marriage to take it to the next level. So I just want to highlight that because you kind of brought up in a sideway, you kind of said that. Like, I just want to highlight that how important all those things are.
Our
Whether it's
foundational needs.
yeah,
Yeah, foundational needs, and it's ironic that we compromise those when our higher level needs, if you think about, like, Maslow's hierarchy needs or something like that, we get compromised or perceptually compromised, at least up here with, like, love and belonging, and then we self-sacrifice and fuck up our own sleep, our own nutrition, our own water intake, and everything else that completes to our physiology in the way that you just described.
yeah,
You also talked about the other pillars. I'd be curious just to hear you kind of explain them too, because you mentioned environment as well, which will tie into environmental resiliency.
yeah. So I look at environment two different ways. One is your home, office, and transportation, and I ask the questions of my clients: does your environment support the person you're becoming, or is it self-limiting to some degree or another? And I look at it as via negativa and via positiva. Via negativa, what do we need to remove from your environment that's no longer serves you? And via positiva, what you need to add to your environment. And I'll stop there and see if you have any questions before I kind of get into a monologue on what that means.
What do you find people more often need to do? Subtract or add these days?
These days, probably subtract.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because we have a tendency to be consumers and we just buy all kinds of shit we don't need. And it's
yeah,
very distracting. Yeah. And everyone's unique and different. Like me, I like a clean, organized space. My digital life has to be clean because if it's messy, it makes me doesn't do well for my psyche,
sure.
right? That's me personally. Some people like the crazy scientists. They love mess. Cool, that works for you. That's awesome. Do your thing, whatever works for you. But know what your thing is, and create the environment that supports that. I'll give you a V negative example and a V positive example. A V negative example, and I know this is not you, but if I was working with you and you're like 30 pounds overweight and you're like, yeah, I eat a lot of sugary stuff, and I'm just trying to, be a little bit more paleo-ish or carnivore-ish, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to do, which means just knock out the sugar. Cool, that's great. So show me your desk. Yeah, sure. And show me your desk. There's candy on the desk. Show me your pantry, and there's ho-hos and Twinkies. I was like, great. Show me your refrigerator, and there's all the stuff in there that's just full of sugar. We don't even know it's full of sugar, but it's full of sugar. All right, so via negativa. Like instead of spending your willpower points not eating or drinking those things which are problematic for you and the kind of life you want to have, and you don't have diabetes and have heart disease and metabolic dysfunction. Cool. Via negativa. Let's remove that stuff So you're not wasting your time out trying to eat it because you're going to lose that battle most likely eat it. If you have been for this whole period of time, cool. Remove those things. Via Positiva, I had a client of mine who's training up for Corporal camp, and you have to do the SEAL Fit PSTs, the run, the you have to run the push-ups, the sit-ups, the pull-ups, certain period of time, certain numbers in a certain period of time. And he was kicking ass, but he couldn't get knock the pull-ups out. I was like, Mike, I don't have time to go to the gym anymore to get any more pull-ups. I can't knock it out. I'm like, all right, get a pull-up bar for your home. Put it in your home office. Every time you go, take a crap, walk your dog, drink coffee, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Anytime you walk underneath that thing, you got to knock out whatever, a handful of pull-ups. Maybe it's like 2 at a time. No big deal. Just do 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it was. By the end of the day, he's doing 20 extra pull-ups. By the end of the month, his PSTs were really easy. We just modified his home environment, actually his home work environment, just slightly to make that more possible for him. There's a million things we can do like that. Whether it's removing something or adding something, just makes our lives more functional towards the ends that we're seeking.
My father, collegiate wrestler, told me a very similar story about either something that was in his house or someone he knew that did that. But he installed a pull-up bar in our hallway that connected to our bedrooms and our primary bathroom to the rest of the house. And he encouraged me, knock out 5 every time you pass it. And I went through periods of my life where I really embraced that. And it's so funny. You give yourself that little challenge, and 5 pull-ups for the small kid I was not hard. But before the end of the day, you're doing 50, 60 pull-ups. And my goodness, anything you do consistently, you're going to get better at eventually over time. And it's amazing. Again, that those small micro challenges that you give
Yeah.
yourself and
Yeah.
environmentally making them accessible to you,
Yeah.
um, or removing the unnecessary, unproductive challenges from your environment that you have to use mental willpower to consistently ignore. And you're not going to rise to the level of your expectations. You'll fall to the level of your training. You've been trained for when
Yeah.
you're stressed to grab those Sour Patch Kids, get
Yeah.
that shit out of your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
give yourself an unnecessary challenge so you can focus on the things that truly matter? I love that little nuance and system that you have for what can we add to enhance your environment for ways that matter, what can we remove so you don't need to focus on it in the first place.
Well, you can't see it. And I'm not going to move my computer around, but I have literally my dumbbells are over here. And the first thing, the eighth thing I do each morning, because I have a whole list of things that I do as part of my AM rituals, I literally move them into the middle of the room. And anytime I walk by, to do like either get some water, go to the bathroom, go whatever I'm do. It's not pull-ups, but it's the same thing. I have to do a set of something. And it's like by the end of the day, like I literally, I mean, it's not an HIT workout. I'm not sweating my ass off, but I've literally knocked out a good workout in addition to whatever I'm doing that particular day.
You've gotten something in.
If a client's a runner, I'm like, where do you keep your running shoes?
Yeah.
In the basement. Where's your fucking basement? Like make these things as so available to you, you have no excuse. Because we tend as human beings to see comfort and see excuses. It's right in front of you. That's more likely or not that you're going to do it.
And this is my philosophy behind those intentional stress challenges being
Yeah.
really short in duration and ideally done in the morning because you give yourself that small win. This is not a training program to become some elite athlete or cause these extraordinary adaptations for this month in your neck. You'll get stronger, you'll have better flexibility and mobility, but it's intended to hopefully supplement whatever your other training program is. But also, days change, schedules fall apart. You get sick, something else happens. Have these ways to still get something in ways that are productive for you. And like you said, I can move my computer around right now so you can see a weight vest on the ground, running shoes, and a
Oh,
kettlebell right here.
so
And
I'll see. And I love so yeah, pretty much my weight vest is over there too. And I didn't do this today, so I have to throw myself under the bus for that. But like I live in New York now. I used to live in Texas. And I don't have a car, I walk everywhere, and 90% of the time, except I guess today, obviously I didn't do it today, but I throw a weight vest on
yep.
when I go grocery shopping. When I do my errands, I carry my weight vest as much as I can. Not, I should say as much as I can because I probably could do it more than I do, but I do it a lot of the time. Why? I don't have to think about it, and then I'm getting a good workout in while doing something else. habit stacking, as they might say. you know,
Absolutely. And
yeah,
you mentioned Michael Easter before, and I did too when I talked about Super Medium. But Comfort Crisis, one of my favorite books, easily top 10 of all time. And he's coming out with another book this year called Walk with Weight. And it's, I mean, he's kind of the goat of rucking, at least for
right,
modern day. He made it extremely popular
yeah,
in a variety of ways. And we got others on Substack like John Daly with Ruck the Fuck Up, one of my favorite accounts who
nice,
taken after it. Very similar in age to you, former Marine, and he was part of Detachment One that led to the Marine Raiders being back in the special operations. Phenomenal book. It's up here behind me somewhere, Tough Rugged Bastards, but he's still in his 50s running with those special operations Marine Raiders,
yeah,
just doing incredible challenges at incredible rates. But he's able to do that at his age because he's living this life in the exact same way that you do and talk about, of staying disciplined and after it in the ways that matter to him. Healthy marriage, great father, wonderful writer, but he's doing all these things to facilitate his why in the ways that benefit himself. And I love the idea again that, I mean, I know when I was a kid, I'm about to turn 40 in less than half a year. I'm about to be over the hill. It's about all downhill for me. Absolutely not true. I mean, we talk about you guys, and you did the 50-mile ruck last year. John was running 300 miles during COVID until he started shifting because he couldn't do the events anymore. He started shifting to rucking because he could be outside in nature wearing weight, and that's when he started falling into that realm. And then I got a buddy on Substack named Marshall Peterson. He's 78 years old. He's a cross country skier. He can deadlift 450 pounds. He does all these daily challenges. He sends me videos of these other exercises and things that he does, and just his mobility, his strength, his endurance. It's all incredible. But he's able to do that because, hey, guess what? He's been doing it his whole life. And he's
yeah,
had setbacks, he's had illnesses, he's had reasons not to. And at 78, he has every reason in the world to stop. You're too old. It's not
yeah,
good for
yeah,
you.
yeah, 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 yeah,
No, I
yeah.
mean, you see
Yeah.
him, he looks, outside of maybe a few wrinkles and gray hairs, he looks like a 30-year-old man within his physique and his ability to move. And that happens with my favorite words: intention, effort, and consistency, and finding ways to add something in every day. And if you can't do your hour to the gym, that doesn't mean the day's a wash. You have
Yeah,
all these things that we talked about at your disposal, and you don't need to buy that weight vest. You can walk around with something that is a little heavier. You can find something to move. You can do something with body weight. You can find ways to improve your life productively. And that
right,
is self care. I mean, don't get me wrong, have your pleasures, watch your Netflix, do whatever that you enjoy doing. But self care is improving your life intentionally in some capacity so you
mhm,
can earn the ability to rest. If all you're doing is resting, you're not moving, you're not living, and you're actually going to be suffering more because of it.
yeah, 100% agree. We kinda started the conversation with my redefinition, redefining resilience to include rest and recovery, and not just pushing through things to the expense of your life and your body. The last little piece on the environment piece, you're probably found this too. So, like, I work with a lot of people who are like trying to optimize themselves, be much more resilient. And so they're eating well, they're sleeping, they're exercising, all that stuff. So they're really concerned about what they consume, like with food and their air and their hydration, and even what they consume in terms of like television, YouTube, and all that stuff, social media. Awesome. But then I find out what they're using for cleaning supplies, really to clean their environment. Or if they're women, the cosmetics they might put on their face or their hair. And guys put stuff, stuff shampoos and conditioners and gels and stuff like that. I'm like, you're really trying to keep yourself clean, detoxify from all the crap you consume, and you put the stuff on that absorbs through the skin, and you're just adding, possibly, depending on environmental working groups, research that I've seen, possible carcinogenic or neurotoxic effects. So, like, hey, yeah, eat organic food, but don't put crap on yourself that's going to absorb into your skin. That's just as bad as pesticides, herbicides, possibly, that you don't want to be eating with your food. So be mindful of what you're consuming will put on your skin or using the food. So that is also part of my environmental work, to start thinking along those lines too.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
that kind of reminds me of something I wanted to bring up, and it segues in that a little bit. And don't get me wrong, we have more evidence than ever on microplastics, carcinogens, and
yeah,
environmental influence to our physiology,
yeah.
body, and overall well being. But I know you taught a course when you were at a parent Zoe, Limitless, and the class was on anti fragility.
Wow, did
And
your research.
Yeah, I did. So I saw that word and I read Nassim Taleb's book a couple years ago. Really enjoyed it, and he's a hilarious, brilliant writer. Amazing concept that I love, where he differentiates fragility or systems, organisms, people, whatever. When stress comes, it weakens because of it. Anti fragility is when volatility, stress, and chaos come. It grows because of it. And then in the middle, he entertainingly shits on robustness and resilience. He doesn't necessarily shit on it, but he does make fun of it quite a bit. And I found it hilarious. But it endures and bounces back to the original form when chaos and stressors of any kind come in. And I enjoy differentiating those concepts. It's important. And I'm curious, before I start giving my thoughts, and maybe you might be able to guess them. What was your anti-fragility course on, and kind of how did you use that in the realm of being the director of human resilience?
Yeah, I had a great time. Meg Foley, she's a PhD, sports psychologist. She actually just working now with special forces somewhere in 'cause it's no longer they changed the fort back down to there's Liberty. What did we just change it back to under Trump? Was Fort Liberty
I
Bragg.
can.
They changed it
There
back
you
to
go.
Bragg.
I
She's
can
now
never keep up.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
But I got the opportunity to work with her. She was awesome. We put this course together, and it's pretty much a lot of the stuff you and I just spent literally 2 hours talking about. Emotions, mentations, or cognitions, diet, nutrition, fitness, sleep, circadian biology. Like we touched upon as much as we knew back then. We even know more now. It'd be really fun to kind of get back to with her and create this course again. That the course is like on those kind of things. How do you create the conditions internal to yourself so when you do encounter the adversity, you become much more adaptive and expansive. It's a use stress as opposed to your chronic stress. You grow from it as opposed to contract as a result of it. And it's not just a mental thing. It's not just an emotional thing. It's not just a spiritual thing. It's not just a physical thing. It's like all those things play a role.
Distress versus eustress. I bring that concept up all the time when I'm talking about my definition of resilience, because stress is neither good nor bad. It's usually our
Yeah.
perception of it within the domain we're operating. If we think it's distress, that makes stress potentially fragile, particularly if we don't recover from it. Eustress, enjoying it, seeing the delayed gratification of it, it can become anti-fragile, or the ability to grow. Um, yeah, I like that. That has to be an interesting class, and I love looking into like different examples of anti-fragility. And I mean, we talk about stress inoculation, like it's done in the military, or vaccinations when you give someone a dead virus, so the body experiences exposure to it, develops immune system response, and then you are more resilient and anti-fragile, if you will, to exposure to that potential virus in the future. So there are a lot of medical and biological examples of our anti-fragility, but I I hesitate and wonder when it comes to mental resilience and the human capacity when it comes to anti-fragility. Like there's certain things that happen, and without question, you can't be anti-fragile if you're not resilient in the first place. So like I don't think you don't bounce back to original form from any stress response. That's why I think training the skill that is resilience requires stress. And then when you do recover, you don't recover to the same human being. You have wisdom now, you have experience, you have the capacity to grow. So there is no anti-fragility without resilience. But also, you lose your arm, we don't grow that back stronger. And this isn't mental anymore. This is just physical, but we definitely adapt and we can explore the capacities and become something different. But I hesitate to like, and he does this well in his book too. Taleb does, but like he has these tables where he has fragility, robustness, and anti-fragilities, and very intentionally he leaves that middle one, robustness and resilience, blank in a lot of his funny examples of things that are anti-fragile versus fragile, because he makes fun of people in these columns too at times.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
But when it comes to human resilience and human anti-fragility, I love the concept, but abstractly, great orientation. Concretely, in my opinion, and of course I'm quite biased, I write on resilience all the time, and maybe that's part of it. But if you think during the storm, after a loss of a loved one, like you said, it would be unnatural and maybe more concerning in some ways if someone didn't respond at all. I'm going to get better because of this. My daughter just died. I would be very concerned about that individual. But if I can, I'm going to live for her. I'm going to support my other children and my wife during this hard time. I'm going to feel and fully express my emotions in ways that are safe at appropriate times, so I can still show up, protect, and provide for my family. I'm going to find a way to live for her the best that I can and endure. I might not be better because of this loss, but I will try to make the most of my opportunity to still do what I can while I can. The orientation, particularly in the moment, to resilience for me it is more empowering. And if growth is possible, it's not going to happen in the first place without resilience.
And I used to be more precise with my language, like resilience and fragility. I stopped that a couple years ago. And I stopped using anti-fragility, anti-fragile too. I love Seam's work. He's crazy on Twitter. I don't know if you follow him.
I hear about it. I'm not
Yeah,
on Twitter much.
yeah. I stay off Twitter, but yeah, he's crazy on Twitter. And I love his concept, and I used his language for a little while, but it didn't really take off. It's not as popular as I wish it would have been. And the word fragile has a political connotation to it.
Yeah,
That's not really what he intended it to be originally. So, like, it's not that I stay away from it. If I'm talking to someone like you, I can use it. But depending on what the audience I'm speaking to, resilience lands much better for most people. They have no idea what anti-fragility means.
right.
So I also speak to where the people are at and whom I'm talking to, and then the knowledge base they have and what they've read and what they understand. Although, like I said, I love anti-fragility, and if it's more popularly accepted, I'll probably use it more often. But it's less so. So resilience just seems to work really well for me. Obviously, it works for all for you too.
Yeah, and again, the language it updates the concepts and the capacity for what resilience can offer you, and it doesn't need to be differentiated, in my opinion, because again, you can't have anti fragility without resilience in the
Yeah.
first place. So,
Yeah.
Nassim gifted this world a very powerful concept and an orientation, which, by the way, because I work in acquisition for the military, and I work with a lot of engineers that look at model-based systems engineering in different ways in complex systems to have anti-fragility for when there are threats and disruptions of the system. How does it not only endure, but maybe even counteract it and use all of these machine learning and AI and all these cool technologies to take advantage of threats and then counterattack in the cyberspace or whatever it may be, and of course in the physical space too. That concept is wonderful for processes and models and inanimate objects, and also for animate objects to know that it's possible. But again, the orientation for me, in my experience, when I've thought back on before I had that language, and even now when I'm struggling, I I know it's possible, but for me, sometimes just enduring, just managing effectively and trying to recover where I can. And wherever I bounce to, I bounce forward, bounce back, bounce differently. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need that initial, like you said, your original definition of resilience, which was more like grit and persistence.
Yeah.
And that mental toughness is needed
Yeah.
when adversity inevitably comes. But as you manage it and get to a point of weathering that initial challenge, now we can start thinking about how can I capitalize on this and make this challenge an opportunity. But that duration is going to vary based on the stressor in the first place. And if it's a loss of a life, perceived threat, whatever it may be, you really got to start thinking, I got to manage what I can control right now, not think about how great this is going to be down the line.
Yeah, two things crossed my mind listening to you talk about that, and I agree with everything you just said. One is my universe is filled with yes and. Like, on my gravestone, it's gonna say 2 things. That makes no sense, which I can tell you a story about, because ever since a little kid, I was trying to make sense of this world we live in. And then yes, and, because I always go like, "Yes, that's true, and there's more, and there's more, and there's more." That's why I said earlier, like, my definition of resilience is this presently. It's gonna evolve hopefully over time, and it's be inclusive. I'm gonna include the old stuff into a more expansive definition, and I hope I continually I hope I'm not a Johnny One Note and say the same fucking thing for the next 30 years. I'm like, hopefully I'm, growing, change, and come up with new stuff, more expansive. So yes, and, yes, and. And I just lost my second thing. I was going to tell you a relationship story, but I can't remember what the hell it was now.
I
Yes,
also
and
like
yeah.
I also like saying no, but. So, like, if I'm gonna like reject something, no, but I will find a way to support or lead to somebody
Oh,
else. It's different. But I
oh,
love
nice.
two things are true. And my wife says that, and she got that from a wonderful book called Good Inside by Dr. Becky Kennedy. It's a parenting book, but it's a strategy about like understanding their perspective and then considering another perspective, and then of course applying it to yourself too. Like absolute truth. I don't think she wrote on Kennedy didn't write on this, but absolute truth is very hard to find in many realms.
Sure.
Maybe impossible to truly find when it comes to absolute truth. So universal truths, conceptual truth, your truth, somebody else's truth, empathy, all that stuff is great. But usually two things are true. And that's just like you and I have a disagreement. There's probably three truths. It's my perspective, your perspective, and somewhere in the middle when all the other complexities of the world actually influence the situation in the first place. But when it comes to like supporting other people, and it's not something that you can take on right now, no, but
I love that.
there's still something that we can do to support that. So when you said yes, and it just reminded me of like something I try to use whenever rejection is needed for managing what is on your plate when you have a say.
I'm stealing that. I love that. Okay. Thank you.
Well, you better, because I think I'm gonna steal 100 things from you from this conversation tonight.
I
Brother, we
know.
have been talking for 2 hours, and it
Yeah.
feels like it's been 15 minutes. Just like our past conversations, the first time I got the opportunity to talk to you, we scheduled, I think, for like 30 minutes and talked for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And
Not
now
at
that it's
all.
9 PM, I'm gonna help the wife get the kiddos down,
Oh,
but
yeah.
without question, I would love to keep conversations with you going. Wealth of knowledge, obviously, tons of wisdom from your 30 years of experience, and contributed so much to the space already, to my life and many others. And brother, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight.
For me too, man. And like you said, we probably talked for hours and hours and hours. I think you're gonna be on our podcast, and we will be
I look
talking even
forward to it.
more. Any
I look
recording
forward to it.
session. Yeah.
Until next time, my friend. Talk
I've
soon. All right.
Remember, all the knowledge in the world means little unless you uniquely apply it to your life. Challenge yourself to take action. Knowledge applied is wisdom earned. Determine what is important to you and get after it with intention, effort, and consistency. Until next time, stay resilient, my friends.